And welcome to Madden Benz Unfiltered. It's a rotten, gloomy day outside after a rotten, gloomy day over at Acrisure Stadium where the Steelers lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mark, we talked about this swath of 4 games coming out of the bye before they went back in division to the 2 teams on the road in Ohio against the Browns and Bengals. I thought they had to go at least 3-1 in that stretch to have playoff hopes. Well, now they've painted themselves in a corner. They got to beat Tennessee on Thursday. They got to beat Green Bay next week. And I don't know why I should have confidence in them winning those 2 games after the way they looked against Jacksonville on Sunday. I know the refs were bad, but they didn't make them that bad.
Well, I don't have faith in them to win these next 2 games, but they might anyway. But they're just a subpar football team. They might make the playoffs based on there being a lot of subpar football teams in the National Football League in on their schedule. But they just look 7 shades of excrement against Jacksonville, and they're blaming the refs, and that is so Steelers in the latter-day Tomlin era, to deflect from the fact that you suck any which way you can. But Isaac Seumalo hit the nail right on their head. He said the refs ain't the reason we lost. And he's become a voice of reason in that locker room. And what's disturbing is no one's parroting him. You have Deontay Johnson saying the refs wanted us to lose. That's the same Deontay Johnson, Tim, had a couple drops yesterday, including one on the very first series. Hasn't caught a touchdown in a season and a half, but he's blaming the refs. These guys just absolutely refuse to look in the mirror, and that starts with the head coach. Oh, he pays lip service to it, but nothing changes. Case in point, I just saw this on Twitter, Tim. Rodney Williams, who's this journeyman veteran jabroni tight end, right?
Yeah, he was decent in August in training camp, and now that Freiermuth got hurt, they made him the 3rd tight end. Yeah.
He played more snaps than Darnell Washington.
I think he got as many.
What the frig?
Yeah, and he had 1 target, which means he came close to as many as George Pickens had. You know, for as much as they thought that they had unleashed Pickens in recent weeks in a game where he talked the talk before, and in a game where you would figure he would be the primary target with 2 Jacksonville defensive backs that start out of the game, including their biggest, most physical one, they couldn't figure out a way to get him involved.
Well, Connor Hayward got 6 targets. George Pickens got 5.
There's something that bugs me. Again, going back to a lot of discussion of the week going into the Jacksonville game, a lot of the talking points were about the Steelers scripting plays and kind of probing the defense to figure out what the defense's hand was going to be when they showed certain looks as the game went along. And then I heard in the postgame it was really tough to get Pickens the ball because they were clouding coverage to him. Like that was the phrase that Mitch Trubisky used because he was asked about the interception. We went to Allen Robinson on a 3rd and 2 deep. We thought it was time to push the ball down the field. They're clouding coverage to George Pickens. How about you just do your own thing? How about you go out there the first couple drives of the game and not worry about making the defense show its hand and just call plays that you think are going to friggin' work?
They are not dynamic at all, Tim. That offense isn't dynamic at all. The quarterback's not dynamic at all. Kenny Pickett ain't the guy. We talked about that on the podcast. He is not a starting caliber NFL quarterback and will not be. He's had 20 games to prove himself. He hasn't played 1 truly good game out of those 20. Will Levis, in his NFL debut for Tennessee, first game he's ever played, he's a rookie, doesn't even have the pedigree Pickett did, threw 4 touchdown passes in the game. And he's coming to town Thursday, by the way. And if Pickett can play, I bet Levis kicks his ass.
It looks like Levis, well, if you look at the stat line, kind of to underscore your point, Mark, he had a passer rating higher than Pickett's ever had in any single game. He had 4 touchdowns. Pickett's never had more than 2. And I believe yardage-wise, he had more yards in that game than Pickett has had in any game all year. And I think Pickett's only had 4 of a higher yardage total.
Well, and you see, we keep trying to shield Golden Boy Kenny from blame. Like it's the coordinator, it's the offensive line. There's no running game. He just stinks. Kenny Pickett just stinks. Flat out stinks. There is no way you look at his 20 games and conclude otherwise. He's Mason Rudolph, but from a college that the locals like.
Well, here's the problem, Mark. I don't think the locals who might be suggesting that the offensive coordinator and the line stink are wrong. It's just that Kenny might stick too.
They're right, but he should still be doing better.
Oh, no doubt. Well, the missed touchdown to Deontay Johnson was a perfect example of that, because while Deontay Johnson blasted the refs in no uncertain terms, he tried real hard to qualify his criticism on that play. It still kind of came through, though, when he said, it's not like he's not trying his ass off. He is. And he read the defensive back a certain way. Kenny might have read the defensive back a different way, but Johnson made it pretty clear that when you're that open, you just got to make that play and make that throw in that situation. It's right.
An inaccurate throw, and Pickett is far too inaccurate far too often.
That would have been Johnson's first touchdown going back to before last year, as you pointed out. He had a decent statistical game, but also had the 2 drops on the first drive, one of which that would have been wiped out by a penalty anyway.
Trey Essex just had a good tweet right before I came on. He said, this offense is so bad, I'm tired of talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, this, we'll get to this later, but it's akin to what Penguins fans are dealing with the power play. We all know why it's not working, and we're trying to...
the power play's a lot worse.
We're trying to...
it is. I'm not kidding. The power play has the components to succeed. The Steelers offense doesn't.
That's a fair point. They've got the tools, they just refuse to put them in the toolbox the right way. Whereas the Steelers... we tried to do this during the offseason. I was just listening to the guys on DVE before we came on their morning show, and they're playing back calls from last night. These borderline throw me off the bridge callers for the Steelers, who it's kind of their own fault because they talked themselves into how talented the team is. I kept hearing that from these callers, we're so talented, why aren't we winning? They're not that talented.
Oh, yeah, you still hear that. I heard that. Were they playing it from the Charlie Batch and Rob King show?
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, oh, no, there were guys saying everybody knows this team is good enough to win a playoff game, and this team ain't good enough to do bupkis. It stinks.
Yeah, I mean, even
the defense stinks. The defense has a couple good guys, and that's it. Nobody's talking about the genius of the con artist now. The con artist did this. The con artist did that. Con artists didn't do crap.
Well, you kind of brought this up when you discussed Ciamalo. You called him, I think you said, a voice of reason, right, in the locker room.
Yeah, he ain't no good either, but okay.
Well, that's where I'm going with it is, he seems to have the right mentality, but he hasn't been as good as advertised. Cole has the right mentality. He's not good. He probably shouldn't even be starting at this point. Broderick Jones, Dan Moore, James Dan, all those guys up front seem to have the right mentality, but it just doesn't translate. Similar with some of the guys in the secondary. They're all great upstairs. But
I can't believe Broderick Jones still isn't playing. I can't believe that. Well, I mean, Joey Porter played yesterday because he has to. He played more snaps. But this team has been poorly assembled.
Wallace was out. Wallace was inactive. So
that's what I mean. I mean. But this team has been terribly assembled, and now it's being terribly coached.
When you brought, going back with the line of talent succession, the last time I genuinely thought that they were better than the other team going even into a playoff game was when they played Jacksonville in 2017 and they got boat raced. Well,
here's the other thing too, Tim. I have said that this could be the year before the year, that they could be real good next year. They're not going to be real good next year because Pickett isn't improving at all. And that's the most disturbing thing about Kenny Pickett's failure. There is no sign whatsoever of him getting better. You tell me, Tim, where's he getting better? I see the same quarterback I saw the very first snap he took in the NFL.
Yeah,
he's not getting better.
There's nothing new to advance as to why you should feel that there's growth there. There was just more of the same from last year, which was never really throws the big interception that kills you, although he's had 4 dropped pick sixes this year. But the team keeps it close enough and he's good late in games. But there's supposed to be a menu beyond that this year, and there's no expanded menu.
And they've turned him into last year they turned him into a game manager. And he's developed into a bad game manager. Tim, this guy has 5 touchdown passes in 7 games. This is the NFL. That's not what the league is. And if that's on him, if that's on the offense, if it's on Canada, if it's on whoever, it's unacceptable and won't win ever at this level.
Look at who Levis played yesterday. It was Atlanta. So, the Steelers played Atlanta last year. They weren't any good last year. Maybe Atlanta's a little bit better this year, whatever. the Steelers went there and won like 13-10, and it was just a grind your teeth, chew your fingernails to the nub routine. Levis goes out there and throws 4 touchdown passes. Like, it can be done when you're young in this league. It's just that Pickett isn't doing it.
It can be done if you're not gutless. The offense is gutless, and it's turned Kenny Pickett gutless.
And you know what? The defense wasn't great either. I know everybody wants to.
Can I take that back? The whole team's gutless. I used to not think that Tomlin was coaching to preserve his never having had a losing season record. Now I think that's exactly what he's doing. He plays it so close to the vest all the time. I believe now in the hope that they can stumble to 9-8 and they can still talk about Tomlining on the Greenberg show.
They better have 8 or 9 wins going in those last 3 weeks, because I'm not sure if they win more than 1 game those last 3 weeks against the 2 AFC North teams in Seattle on the road, where they always
Would it
stink.
shock you if they lost the next 4?
I'd be surprised if they lose to Green Bay. Green Bay's pretty bad.
Would it shock you if they lost 3 of the next 4?
No, it would not.
There you go.
No, it would not. The whole AFC North right now is 4-3, except for Baltimore's in first place. Mark, one last thing before we get to the Penguins. That's the defense. I know it created turnovers. Great for them. Same time, though, they stayed on the field for 34 minutes. The Jaguars did something different that a lot of teams do to them, which is usually they figure out how the Steelers' coverage is going to look, and then they pump the ball to one guy and just move the ball that way. It's been one receiver for the most part all season long, whether it was Brandon Ayuk or Puka Nacua or Mari Cooper or Devontae Adams. There's usually been one receiver that's Nico Collins from the Texans that kills the Steelers. Trevor Lawrence was content to give ATN 70, Ingram the tight end 85 or so, Kirk 85 or so, whoever it was. I guess it was actually Calvin Ridley who was the third guy over 70.
You know what Trevor Lawrence did, Tim? I give him credit. He had what I call a good bad game. That wasn't a very good game by his standard. Certainly not as the first pick overall. But I thought he hung in there and then just made plays finally. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I see what you're saying insofar as I don't know if he threw one pass in particular that was as good as the interception in the end zone to KZ was bad, if that's what you kind of mean.
Well, the ball at the end was kind of lucky. It got everybody in betwixt and between, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, there's a good example of calling a good play at the right time against the right defense.
Yeah, I mean.
That's what that looks like.
I just think Pickett ain't the guy. I think Tomlin is not a good coach for this team anymore. I think Canada is a terrible coach. I just think there's so much about this team that stinks, and it's about time we recognize that. And people are going to say, well, how are they 4-3? How are they 11-5 in their last 16? They've got lucky. Okay, they got lucky the way Minnesota got lucky last year, winning all those one-score games, and now the luck is about to totally run out, I think.
Yeah, and Omar Khan did not overrule Mike Tomlin on any draft choice. Like Mike Tomlin wanted to trade up and get Broderick Jones.
The opposite.
Exactly. And Mike Tomlin wanted Joey Porter Jr.
I would guarantee you, absolutely guarantee you, that the guy who said, let's take Pickett was Mike Tomlin. Period. I guarantee that did not cross anybody's mind as hard and as definite as it did Mike Tomlin's.
All right, Mark, on to the Penguins and their problems. You talked about the power play. We've talked about the power play at length. Aside from the power play, what do you think is the biggest problem facing them right now?
Goaltending. Goaltending's awful. And that's weird because Jari leads the league with 2 shutouts, but it's feast or famine. Like 2 of the first 3 goals, well, he let in 3 goals total. The last 2 goals before he got pulled against Ottawa, if it had been any deeper in the net, Tim, it'd have been behind it. It'd have been the first row of the stands with a beer. They're just awful goals. And I always say that you can tell in the first couple shifts of a game if Jari's going to be good or bad if you see him at the top of his crease or not.
Mm-hmm.
If he's at the top of his crease, he'll be okay. If not, he's going to stink. And he stunk against Ottawa.
Does that tend to be a confidence thing with a goalie, or when you see a goalie who has that bad habit, why?
I think he's just dumb. Honestly, I don't think he has any focus. I think he's just dumb.
Like, that's why he can't take coaching? Is that what you're suggesting, that he just can't process it?
I think that's why he probably has trouble using the Keurig in the morning, Tim. I I think Tristan Jarry's just dumb.
Do you have a Keurig? I don't have a Keurig. I have a slow
Yes.
drip. You have a Keurig,
I
huh?
love it. I love it.
See, I always think that Keurig coffee tastes a little plasticky. I don't know.
No. Damn you for saying that, Tim. The slow drip, you can make a whole pot though, right?
No, I just get the right feel of what it feels like, the right amount, and then I put the matching amount of water in. I just use the same size cup. That's the one
thing I would like a machine where I can have a whole what do they call it? Pot of coffee, like a bunch, but I just do the cup at a time.
Well, you know what else? The other problem with having a filtered coffee like I've got, you've got a cat. Cats love to go after coffee filters, and they're just horrible to clean up. So, like, a Keurig's probably the right move for you.
Yeah, probably like throwing the cat in a ditch is the right move, but
I bet you Clipper would be great on caffeine too. That's what she needs is some Starbucks dark roast to really get her going in the morning. Get her addicted to caffeine. That'll be the right move for you.
I had to pull last night. In the kitchen, I had sliced buffalo chicken.
Yeah.
And I dropped a bit of it. And I luckily found it just as he was finding. I should have been really sick.
Oh, she can't eat spicy stuff.
No, she can't.
Mark, what about Pitt? We haven't gotten to Pitt yet, and their blowout loss against Notre Dame.
One thing I want to say about the power play and the goaltending for the Penguins first.
Okay.
It will not change. They will do the power play the way they're doing it until they don't make the playoffs. I promise you that. They will play Jarry as the number one until they don't make the playoffs. I will promise you that. Everything I said could go wrong with this team is so far, and they're showing no desire to fix it. Am I right?
Well, why do you think missing the playoffs would be the line of demarcation? They missed the playoffs last year and they still didn't change anything.
Right. And if they keep the same gang around next year, the same thing will happen. They're convinced they're right.
Yeah, and they're convinced they're happy. Like they're comfortable.
There's two things I can't believe they ain't done with the power play. Okay. They need to ask Erik Karlsson what to do because he knows more about it and is better at it than all of them, including the coaches. They should say, okay, you've been a great power play quarterback. Who should be where? How should we set up? And number two, Tim, they have the best power play mind in hockey history. And I'm not kidding. Sitting in the press box every night, Eddie Johnston. Ask him what he thinks, because I have. And without revealing too much said in confidence, he's not real complimentary.
Fair enough. And you know what? There's not a lot of, it's not like NFL play calling with 11 guys on the field and, changing price structure for given positions. It's 5 guys against 4 guys on 1/3 of the ice. Not a lot of science has changed about what the power play is. Like they call different positions different things. Like the bumper position is a phrase that's been used more in the last 5 years than I ever heard.
Well, and they do the drop pass zone entry thing to distraction, which they don't need to do, by the way, because they have all these great puck handlers that can gain the zone without that, and they're wasting time by doing it. But then again, they don't want to hear what I have to say. They don't want to hear what EJ has to say. They don't want to hear what Karlsson has to say. The hope for that power play is that Karlsson at some point loses his mind and says, what is wrong with you people?
Do you think at any point Mike Sullivan will say, well, the biggest problem is we just don't have any good players anymore, like Pat Narduzzi did?
Well, yeah, it's funny, too. I liked what Andrew Taglianetti did on Twitter, the former Pitt player, who was very good, obviously. And he tweeted the next day, I slept on it, and yep, Narduzzi's a jackass.
I'm glad there are some Pitt fans who are coming around to this finally.
And like a lot of the apologists for Pitt and Narduzzi said the quote was taken out of context originally. And even some media members one guy at the Post-Gazette, because Noah Howes was the guy who put it out there, right, from the Post-Gazette, right?
Noah did, yes, yeah.
And like the other guy was real condescending, saying, well, Noah at least owned it, blah, blah, blah. Shut the frig up. When I saw the entire quote in context, I heard it, okay? It didn't mean anything different than it did out of context. He put the blame on the players.
Yeah, the only thing that Noah left out was the BS part, the BS couching, like the intentional
coach
couching.
Starts with me. I mean, this guy's a horrible coach and a horrible person.
Yeah,
okay. They need to get rid of him.
All Noah did was fail to advance the propaganda aspect of the quote, and as we talked about in the podcast, made Narduzzi say the silent part out loud in print. That's what it was.
What they need to do, Tim, is Deion Sanders blamed his offensive line and said they got to get new offensive linemen, which is just so ridiculous. I mean, if I were those offensive line kids, you know what I'd do? I'd quit the team and say, okay, go get them now. So much, Coach Prime, you go get him now. He's there for his kids, especially the quarterback, and nobody else.
Yeah, do you even think Prime knows?
Dad gone insane.
I'm not even sure Prime knows the offensive linemen who are on the great Dallas Cowboys teams, let alone the offensive linemen that are that he's supposed to be coaching right now.
He's a fraud. He's a total fraud. And my proposal is, Tim, Pitt versus Colorado in the douchebag bowl.
Can't wait to see the sponsorship opportunities line up for that one. Where would they play that exactly, Mark? Where do you think the douchebag bowl should be held?
Well, there's no Pitt Stadium. I don't know. Maybe Narduzzi's backyard. Coach Prime could rent a stadium.
Hey, Coach Prime, but he might have the real estate. He's probably got a pretty big house.
Right. So, yeah, but things like that disgust me and are just another reason why I don't watch college sports. And, Tim, as you know, I used to be a Pitt guy. I used to go all the time. I won't go again till he's gone, and haven't.
Eric says the officiating was atrocious. Yes, but sorry, Deontay, it wasn't the ref's fault. You dropped passes that hit you right in the hands and between the 1 and the 8. Are you guys pulling for him to not find the end zone again this season?
Yes.
I'd almost like to see him score just so we can stop talking about it, but I get your greater point, Eric.
The best was in the finale last season when he got tackled like at the 1.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I was so happy.
Eric says, I love Sully. I really do, and I'm forever grateful for all he's done, and I think he's still a very good coach, but he's stubborn. They won't make a coaching change, but would GM Mark and Tim consider it? I would have considered it after the sweep by the Islanders, to be quite honest with you.
I would consider it for sure at season's end, and here's how I would – well, here's the thing. I want Dubas to just make decisions. I think he knows more than anybody they have in a decision-making position, and that includes the core 3. And I want him to make those decisions free of any influence. But, given a lot of reasons, not least FSG's attachment to their fellow Boston guy with Sullivan, I think that might be difficult for him. But then again, if that happens, then why'd he take the job in the first place, and why did they want him?
The most impressive thing that Sully ever did was win the second year in a row, Mark, because as we all know, Penguins previously never won with anything but a new coach. Coach sticks around, everybody gets comfortable, and then things slowly spiral.
Here's what I would do if I were Dubas, but I'm not sure this is his style. And this would be tough to do without news of it spreading and causing a commotion. I would like to see Dubas meet with the core 3 at some point, maybe in the near future, and say, okay, this is not close to working and hasn't been for quite some time, predating my arrival. I am not going to do what you say necessarily, but what do you suggest? And do you understand that this isn't close?
Alex says, look, I know Mark said Sid needs to be on the right half wall, but he's been crap when he's rotated there.
That's because rotating it there is different than having him just be there.
He says forcing pass after pass across the slot, which 80% of the time gets cleared out. He's killing the power play.
If there's one guy who's not killing the power play, it's Sid. But whatever, you think what you think.
Calvin says,
if you had those guys in positions where they weren't always trying to rotate to prove how smart they are, look at that Ottawa power play, which is the same as the Flyers power play, which doesn't rotate, umbrella. They collapse guys in and out depending on where the puck is, right? But it's not complicated, and it works.
Calvin says Rudolph is greater than Trubisky. I don't know how much of a compliment that is.
Who cares? Who cares? Shut up. Calvin, shut up. Is that your girlfriend? Both of you, shut up. Shut up.
They wouldn't start him anyway, because at this point, if they start him and he plays well, that's just going to make them look really stupid. So they won't do it. They'll only put him in if they absolutely have to.
That's why they'll play Pickett no matter what if he's healthy. But I can't see him or Minka playing Thursday. Can you?
Pardon me?
I can't see Minka or Pickett playing Thursday. For sure not Minka.
That looked pretty bad for Minka. I wouldn't expect him on Thursday. And the Pickett thing was weird. It's hard to get a gauge on how hurt he was when they said he...
Okay, Tomlin being a horseman or artist again, okay? Pickett's out there warming up. And Tomlin said after the game to some, with some verbiage, that was not indicative of us deciding whether to play him or not. Well, then why was he warming up? Do you think we're that stupid? Do you think we're stupid as you are? Why was he warming up? And that's a small thing, but just indicative of how he'd rather climb a tree and lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth.
Richard says the Penguins' biggest issue is stubbornness and ego. And then he also adds about the Steelers, simply because he was drafted in the first round, Pickett will likely remain the starting quarterback until the end of next season at the earliest.
That last part's for sure true.
I think both of them are true.
The stubbornness and ego, it's more stubbornness than ego. And if it's ego, it's a collective ego.
Bill says, for as bad as a head coach as Fraudlin is, the players have to execute, and they just aren't. Maybe TJ and Boswell, but the rest of are meh at best, including Pickett. And you know what?
TJ Watt wasn't great yesterday.
Yeah, TJ Watt's, he's either got to figure out.
He wasn't great the week before either. He just made the one huge play.
I think he's got something like maybe it's now 6 tackles or 7 tackles in the last 4 games. And he has had more than half a sack in just one of the last 4 games.
Maybe he's hurt.
He's either hurt, he might be hurt, but I also think it's when you're an outside linebacker and the offensive tackle keeps pushing out and pushing out and pushing out, either you've got to come inside of him or somebody else has to beat the guard then around to get to the quarterback. And they're not doing either.
Whenever TJ Watt fails, the excuse is that he's being double teamed. But if he's the defensive player of the year or the NFL MVP, as people, put forth the notion, and I certainly have put that forth, he has to beat the double teams.
Let's get Robert on. He says if 59, meaning Gensel, wants to win, he won't sign a new deal here.
Well, he already won. And I think it's being rather presumptuous thinking that what Gensel would want for himself and his family.
Pete says is 10-7 still possible? No, I think they top out at 9-8 at best.
Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible.
I think they top out at 9-8 at best, especially with the back half of that schedule back third of that schedule being what it is.
I just hope they go 8-9, Tim, because to quote the Eagles, I'll be going to party town. That's where they party down.
I can't handle that excuse anymore. I would prefer 8-9 than I would 9-8, a playoff berth, a first-round playoff loss, and another offseason of crowing about how great Tomlin is to keep that streak alive.
Have you heard that Eagles song, Tim? Party Time.
No, I haven't.
It's a Fry song. It's one of those, or maybe it was Glenn Fry solo. It's one of those songs that I know is just terrible, and I love it.
Finally, Mark, we discussed this briefly in the podcast, a little pop culture before we go. Anything you wanted to say about the passing of Matthew Perry?
Yeah, it makes me very sad. I thought last night during the Nick at Night block of Friends, they actually slipped in an old Entertainment Tonight profile of Matthew Perry, which I found very interesting. And I think he was the comedic spine of Friends. I think he was the most legitimately funny person on the show, don't you?
I thought he was the best written for. I thought he was the most creative in his comedy. I thought that, generally speaking, every other actor on that show, when it was funny, it was a bit. It was a bit about the character. Like Ross was the, sorrow, downtrodden guy, unlucky guy. Joey was the dumb, handsome guy. Phoebe was the ditzy blonde. Like everybody had an archetype, and Chandler was just funny. Right. That's Chandler was written for and executed humor in whatever situation.
Yeah, and he could get laughs out of nothing too.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was brilliant in the whole 9 yards. I'm going to go back. I saw that. You said it last night, Tim.
Fools Rush In.
What's that?
Fools Rush In.
Yeah, I'm going to go and rewatch it. I haven't seen it for years, but he says that was probably his best work. You know what's funny? And I know he had a history of certain abuses, Tim, but I saw on that Entertainment Tonight thing, they had some video of the Friends reunion. And boy, of all the Friends, he aged the worst in looks.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason some of the stuff he was doing. Some of the stuff he was doing advanced that. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Like that was like when you had all 6 of them there just going back and forth. That's when he really sparkled above the rest. In just a situation like that, just the real people. Like it was funny because he got a little offended in this one stretch because they asked, this was early in Friends, like an early interview. They asked who was the most funny. And one of them said Chandler. And he got a little irked. He said, well, yeah, my real name's Matthew, but thank you. But like, I think those characters probably paralleled a bit.
Yeah, I think you're right on all that. All right, we're done. So
as I said, Tim, I said R.I.P. This is one of my favorite episodes. R.I.P. Miss Chandler Bong. Remember that?
I do remember that episode. Yes. That was when he refused to change his name or something like that. There was a name change.
No. They had like Ross hosted Jeopardy. It was the girls against the guys in a bet.
Oh yes, that's right. For the apartment.
Right. What's the name on the mailing label of Chandler's TV guide? Miss Chandler Bong.
That was the greatest dated reference ever for people who don't know what a TV guide is anymore.
Right.
We were getting stick on the comments. I guess you don't call it a Keurig anymore. There are other names for a Keurig now, so it's kind of like the same thing. We still think what a Keurig, and we still both know what a TV guide is.
Mine says Keurig on the top.
All right, we're back next week for Madden Benz Unfiltered. It'll be long after the game against the Titans, so we'll be looking at Green Bay as much as anything else. Mark is on today, 3 till 6, Monday through Friday on the X, and Read Me Daily.
Tim, an odd guest today, but a good one.
Who's that?
In studio at 4:30, Jacksonville Jaguars owner, Fulham Football Club owner, All Elite Wrestling owner, Tony Khan.
How long is he in? For an hour?
No, I think for half an hour.
Oh, excellent.
AEW is coming here. He stayed in town after the game to promote, the on sale. And he's Tim, like, my first question is going to be, do you really get involved in the dealings of all three? Because that seems hard to believe. But
yeah, it does. Also ask him which stadium the Jaguars are going to play in full time when they move to London.
Well, I think I used this joke already, Tim. I hope it's Tottenham Hotspur Stadium so somebody can actually win something there.
Mark is on at 3. This is Madden Benz Unfiltered.